amazing the amount of stuff that we've covered over the last 4 years. To think it's gone so quickly.
Yeah.
It's really quite surprising.
Is there anything that stands out for either of you as like one of the topics that maybe we come back to regularly, or maybe that you would like to talk about more? Or?
Both yes and no, because as I said, the reason I like violence is because I'm a little bit pent up, and one thing that gets me going is capitalism and politics, and so it gives me an avenue to talk about capitalism and politics.
You can manage to bring it into almost any show, whatever the topic is. Matt can bring capitalism into it. It's
yeah. So it's one thing the podcast does is all the stuff that I think when I'm gaming, I can actually have an avenue to talk about it and discuss it. Whereas otherwise, it's just sat in my head. And if it's stuff like politics and corruption and capitalism, it spoils my day a bit, but I can let a little bit of the pressure off in gaming the system.
I just really enjoy having a group of friends I can talk to about gaming and feminism in the way that we do. We get really nerdy. It's quite niche, but there are other people like us as well, and if we can bring in new audiences, that's always really exciting. One of the things I'm actually really looking forward to talking about more, we have had a few episodes on, is the upcoming and soon-to-be redone series of adaptations of games into TV and film. Like we've talked just recently about Fallout, the new series on Amazon Prime. There's going to be another series for God of War, also on Amazon Prime,
Okay.
There's recently been The Last of Us, which has been really popular on HBO. We have actually also talked about previous film adaptations of games, and usually how they're not the best films out there, but they're usually quite enjoyable. But I just like talking about how the crossover, I guess, between gaming and film and TV, and how that can bring in new audiences. And also one of the episodes I really love, because it's an extra passion of mine, is music and gaming. And because I really love listening to music from TV and film and gaming all together, and just how much that has evolved since I've started being a gamer as well. It used to be, well, back in when you started gaming, Jem, it was all like bits and, like...
Yeah, it wasn't really music.
The kind of 8-bit soundtracks and stuff. And now it's full orchestral, like Abbey Road Studios recordings that you would hear. And you went to a concert recently, didn't you, Matt?
Yeah.
I'm so jealous.
There's a game called Elden Ring, and it was partially... part of the story was done by George R.R. Martin, who wrote Game of Thrones, obviously, and so he made the background for that world, and they've just announced that they've had 25 million players, which goes to show that's the kind of audience you've got, 25 million people, and you think each game costs £50, that's billions upon billions of just one game. And the music, I went to see the concert live at the Albert Hall, and it's just insane, and that's part of the reason why I think adaptions are getting better, is because the work that goes into the games now, it's easier for studios to go, oh my god, that looks incredible already, we could just copy this and it would be amazing. And there's far more orchestra-like performances of game music, because game music is
amazing,
unbelievable, and it's a different discipline to other kinds of music, because you need to be having pleasant trotting along on your horse music, and then a massive hand spider creature pops up out of the ground and grabs you, and then music has to go for that, and that's happened to me several times, and it's incredibly traumatic. But yeah, it just shows music. And orchestras, recording with orchestras, is just people going, hey, games pretty cool, aren't they? And we're going, yes, they've been cool forever.
Yeah, it's so cool when composers talk about the process of writing music for games, because obviously with film and TV, they can like watch the film and do it to the film perfectly on time and everything's done. But with a game, the player's in control. they might spend 10 minutes looking at a flower and leave the music looping to cover that 10 minutes, and then they might have a boss battle that's 5 minutes, and then their friend will have that boss battle last a couple of hours. So they need to find a way to keep the music engaging for all those different players, doing it all different ways, the cues coming in at different times, generated in that way. So I just find that fascinating to think about as well. Yeah. It's very, very clever. So,
and the more complex the industry becomes, the more jobs there are, and more gaming companies are diversifying themselves, and that is so good for the future. The only thing that get in the way going forward, and it's happening a lot now, is artificial intelligence, because I'm sure everyone knows about the Hollywood strikes. It was either earlier this year or last year, and the game industry clearly panicked and thought, well, obviously we're going to move everything to as artificial intelligence as much as possible, so that we don't have to pay people, and then we get to keep more of the money. And they saw that if we wait and give the workers time to unionize, then when we decide to go, we're going to move everything to artificial intelligence, we'll have unions there to go, no. And then unions will be able to stop it happening, because that's the only way you can get things, that you can actually control your working environment. And so they've been, across the industry, they've been laying off thousands of workers. And that's where capitalism comes in and cuts off the progress that we're trying to make with diversity.
And it cuts off the creativity, doesn't it? Because I don't know if anyone's tried to write a story or a poem or anything through with ChatGPT. I have. They're very tame. They're very standard, and I think AI isn't quite there yet, but it will be soon, and it opens up. We did a couple of episodes, didn't we, on AI, and we talked about the threats and the sort of positives of AI, and they do balance out, but it is something that has to be properly considered, because amazing writers wrote the storyline for The Last of Us and for Baldur's Gate 3, which has just recently been out, and people love those stories. They just engage with them. As Matt was talking about, the immersiveness is amazing, and it would be such a shame to end up with a whole series or slew of basic
Live
games,
service.
sort of like merge games, or the silly little games that we all play on our mobile phones. And I do worry that that's where it could end up if we don't recognise it for the art form it can be, actually. And what's the underwater game that you...
Absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing. Basically, there's no talking in it, no dialogue. It's purely just music, and you are a diver swimming around in the ocean. You go through all these different underwater environments, and you kind of just make your way through. You solve a little bit of puzzles, but it's the most beautiful game, and it's very stylized. It's very artistic. It's not realistic, but it's definitely stylized, as if someone sort of sketched it out. And it's got a score by Austin Wintory, who's one of my most favourite game composers. There's also a meditation mode you can go in, which is separate from the main story. You can go into any of those environments, and your little diver will just sit cross-legged like this. And you can zoom in on the different fish, and it tells you the Latin name of the fish. So you can learn while you're gaming as well, which is lovely. And it's just very chilled. It's like watching an aquarium on your TV screen. And then you can get up as the diver and go and swim and interact. My most favourite area was the bit with the manatees, because manatees are my most favourite sea creatures. They're so cute. And they were all sort of, you can make them go around in a little swirl upside down, and you can hold on to them and ride around. It's just lovely, very chill.
That was one of our first live stream Let's Plays, where Alex was playing that, where there's a devastatingly tragic bit with the shark that that broke
very
me.
sad.
It was awful.
Very sad. Yeah.
But apart from that, you can hold on to any
Any fish and like go along.
that goes
Yeah,
past.
it's brilliant. Yeah.
And one thing when talking about live service games, and as with everything, they're trying to normalise things being worse, and it's so important to keep on working and making these beautiful, story-driven games that are experiences, personally crafted experiences, because live service games, they can be okay, but for the most part, they're 3 different kinds of activity. You have a fight, you have a puzzle, you have a race, an explore,
Yeah.
and they go, right, here's a big map, and we're going to have random encounters all over it. And then every 3 months they say, oh, we've got 3 exciting new maps that you can pay money for. And then all of a sudden, gaming turns from it's been like this for a while, you used to just buy a disc, and that was it.
Yeah.
That was it, forever. And now you buy a game, you get a disc, and you get a 60 gigabyte download alongside it, and then it gets updates. But that's okay. But now they want to sell you half a game for full price, and then gradually charge you constantly as you go forward.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I mean, we did an episode on the crisis, the
Cost of living.
cost of
Yeah.
gaming crisis.
And gaming. Yes.
Because I mean, these days it costs around £70
around
for
£70
a high-end, brand new
Yeah.
game.
And if you want the special edition, it's sometimes over £100, which is quite excessive, really, for
They
one
charge
game.
an extra £10 for a soundtrack
like-
that you can get on
And
YouTube.
an extra outfit
And an
that you will
extra
eventually
outfit.
unlock probably halfway through the game if you take your time. But yeah, sometimes you pay for 3 days early access. All they're doing is making you pay more money for your time, basically. It's convenience, which is the way of most things these days, I think. But I love that we've touched on games as an art form, because I think that's a really fundamental part of gaming as a hobby and as a thing to do. It is an art form. There's so much work that goes into a game that's just, I think even as gamers we sometimes take for granted or don't necessarily realise. We talked about music, but there's also the artists, the concept artists, the people that design how the games look, the voice actors, the writers, the playtesters, all sorts. And it's just an absolutely monumental job.
It's really hard to put into perspective for people who aren't gamers, the sheer scale of the industry now, and the opportunity that gaming offers families, particularly different generations of families, because it's easy to look at someone playing it and there's this meme of a dad coming in and saying, "Are you winning, son?" And it goes, "It's not like that anymore, Dad." And but if you can understand, your daughter plays Roblox, and that terrifies me. I have absolutely no idea. I used to do transcription and captioning work, and once I did one for a Roblox streamer, and it's just, it's an alien thing to me. But if Jem, I presume you understand a bit of it.
I try to avoid it as much as possible, but it mostly seems to be lots of arguments from what I can gather. But it's a very chaotic environment, and one of my interests really is how these gaming experiences are going to impact on that generation of kids, because as somebody who's quite positive towards games, I still feel quite worried about the amount of gaming my daughter does and how that's impacting on her life beyond the game world. Is definitely a thing. But talking about different generations gaming, my mum, who is 77 this year, she is she's gaming. She's now got a Switch, and she prefers the puzzly games, and it's just really interesting that she's always played sort of Patience and things like that on her laptop, but now she's getting into playing these games that have more involved storylines and more gaming experience, really. And I think that's, talking about the games as an art form, the breadth of games available now, there is genuinely a game to suit every taste. The big ticket ones that we tend to hear a lot about are either the FIFA games and the big sporting games, or then you get the big sort of games like God of War and The Last of Us, which are big story-driven adventures with lots of fighting.
Fortnite.
But yeah, Fortnite, Overwatch. The kids are playing that, and then you get these games like Absu. You get other games like Journey and other stories where Everyone's Gone to the Rapture. There's a lot of stories that are about just actually experiencing a story, experiencing a sort of not even a choose your own adventure, but that actual immersing in a world and in an environment. And one game that we talk a lot about is What Remains of Edith Finch.
That's a good one, yeah.
Because it's a really accessible game in that you don't need any previous gaming experience to enjoy it. It's just exploring through the house of the character that you're playing as and learning about her family history. And each room has a different story and a slightly different style of storytelling. And that's all it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's nothing to do but to just follow it along. And it's beautiful. You come away from it.
It definitely is a really impactful game, though. I remember finishing it and realising the whole story was really about processing grief.
Yeah.
Which is not something you would think of when you think of gaming. It's a really great way for processing different emotions and for telling stories from different perspectives as well, which I love.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, the emotional range that games can elicit from you now, including rage, like when my mum and my sister play It Takes Two.
Oh, that's a brilliant game.
I love that game.
Yeah, it's tremendous fun sitting behind them, watching them
I'm sure it
work
is.
together.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's, I would say that it's never too late to get into gaming. I think everyone should game in some form because if you think it's just a fun way to pass the time, people think it's just for children. It's not. No. It's for everyone. Everyone can get something out of gaming. Again, it comes to accessibility. It's not just about disability. It's about people who have never played a game before. Because using a controller, it's just like learning to drive. And if you want to play, if you just go, I want to play this big, exciting, difficult game, but you don't stand a chance because you don't know how. It's a muscle memory thing. You need to be able to not think about it while you're doing it. And no games cater to that. So many people just pick it up and go, no, it's going too fast, I don't know what I'm doing, and then never touch it again. And so that's another element where it's getting missed.
When you said about watching your mum and your sister play, it reminded me of how much involvement my family have had in gaming, but also not as gamers themselves necessarily. My mum absolutely loves watching me game. Like, she will sit with me for hours and watch me play games like Uncharted, just for the story.
Yeah.
And sometimes she would do a lot of her own backseat gaming. She'd be like, watch out, that guy's over there, he's going to shoot you.
That's the worst thing.
I
That
know.
drives me crazy when I'm playing a game and somebody's going.
Would you like to do it?
he's trying not to make eye contact with me. And it's like, go over there, look over there. What about that? Have you looked at that? Nah.
But yeah, so it proves again that you don't necessarily have to play the game to enjoy gaming as a medium. You can watch it if it's a very story-driven game, or if you're just excited to see how someone's going to get on and progress, or if they're doing a really hard level that they've been trying 10 times over, will they finally succeed in winning this time? So yeah, I definitely think it's got. You can enjoy it in lots of different ways. You don't have to be the one in control.
No, some of my fondest memories actually are from when I was living in a shared house, and we as a group, there was 4 of us, played Resident Evil, one of the early things, and Resident Evil is a very scary game if you've not come across it, and there's monsters around every corner, and you're constantly just terrified to look round the corner because what's going to be running at you, and you
No, I wouldn't.
and I remember we used to take it in turns. We used to just hand the controller over, and a different person would control. And I remember one particularly memorable experience was when a giant moth attacked me, and I was so terrified that I actually screamed and dropped the controller, and everyone in the room was like, "It's killing you! It's killing you!" And there was this sort of mass grab for the controller. So I mean, that's an extremely social experience and a social gaming thing. Which I think people don't recognise when they think of gaming.
Yeah. Shall we maybe open up for questions, do you think? Have we reached that stage? Does anyone have anything they wanted to chat about, or have any questions they wanted to know more about, or anything in particular? Feel free. If not, we can head off. Yeah? Oh, I think Katie's just come in with the microphone.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
I don't really know much about gaming or any of the games you mentioned, but you talked a little bit about the crossover between sort of gaming and the film world. So if I think of something like Game of Thrones, which I guess has got that kind of fantasy element, it's a fantasy world where anything could happen. And I watched it and I thought, it's just another way. There's these bizarre violence against women, in the form of punishments and things you never even kind of thought about before. And I just thought, no, this is a bit strange. Yet there were female writers on it, so I kind of take your point in a way that maybe people want it as an outlet or something. So I was just wondering, as you were talking, if you knew what the gender split was on gaming design. I mean, are there women writing or getting their points across into gaming design?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
I think that, again, that's when a certain stereotype of the gaming world is that it's not the same as every other entertainment industry. It is. It matches the industry demographics of film and TV. And so as the diversity of that is increasing, it is also increasing in the gaming world, which is a good thing. And the more people who aren't white men in the room, the harder it is for that kind of throwaway things to think, oh, we'll just put a rape scene in there because who cares? It's just another. There's this very grating stereotype of women are only strong because they've been sexually assaulted in the past. That's part of their origin story. They can't just be strong. And so when the more women you have in a room, they go, if it's one woman and 9 men, it's going to be very easy for them to just go, oh yeah, we'll just ignore you. But if there's 6 women and 4 men, and they go, oh yeah, that's a stupid trope. And apart from it being, when it's cheaply done, it alienates people like yourself who go, that's just there for that thing's sake. They're trying to get drama out of the thing. Whereas anything can be done well, but when it's cheap and it's lack of creativity, which is bad for everyone. And so I think the industry is improving, as with other things, but it's not there yet.
One example that pops into my head is Amy Hennig, who I think she wrote Uncharted, or at least the first Uncharted games. Do you remember? And that game features a male protagonist, Nathan Drake. It's kind of very much in the same mold as Indiana Jones, which you might be familiar with. And obviously there is a love interest, and she is at stages very much objectified, although she does do a lot of work herself in terms of getting into tight spots and rescuing herself. But there's also the storyline where she's like, oh no, she's lost her camera, we have to go find it. She's, being a bit of a nuisance here, or you know, that sort of thing. But I think in terms of that genre of game, she was probably being led by forces outside of her control, so the people in charge of marketing or in Naughty Dog Studios who designed the game were probably thinking about, well, what game's going to sell the most? What's going to appeal to our audience that we want to market this to? And of course, stereotypically, that audience was teenage boys in their bedrooms. They wanted to be the action hero who gets the girl at the end of the story. But it was written largely by Amy Hennig for that first game. Anyway, I'm not sure if she's done the later ones in the franchise, but that's one example that pops into my head. That was back in the early 2000s, so a good 20 years ago now. Makes me feel old. But yeah, there are women in the industry, but I think there is. I mean, we haven't even talked about Gamergate, have we?
No.
No.
That's not.
Probably not best to talk about it.
I think there is definitely a bias towards male game developers still, but as we've said, it is improving, and I think, I mean, I know Game of Thrones did get a lot of kickback against the excessive violence against women and girls, and I know there was a lot of, well, that's how it would have been like in those days. It wasn't a historical documentary. It was, you know, it was a fantasy story. I think one of the things that's changing is that the misconception that gamers are all young men, that is it's been so long now that women and female and male players are basically 50-50, and that's been the case for over a decade now. If you go back to 2006, that's when it started to even out. 2 decades, gosh. So I think people are now finally waking up to the fact that actually there is a female audience out there, and they don't always want to play a male protagonist, and they don't always want to have women in positions of
being objectified.
The victim, objectified, weaker, but until we talked a little while ago about a game called Horizon New Dawn, and the main character, the female character in that, she is the one that you play, which is excellent, and she's reasonably fit and healthy female character, and when they first launched the graphics for her, she was accused of being fat because she wasn't stick thin. But we've actually talked about the fact that this woman climbs up rock faces. I mean, she's very kick-ass.
Battles robot dinosaurs.
Barely any muscles.
Yeah.
She's got barely any muscles. She has no body hair except on her head, and she comes from a matriarchal tribe. There's no mention of these things. There's no mention of sort of menstruation or any of those things. So I think we definitely don't have enough women in the room who are raising these issues. But I do think that's changing, especially with the popularity of games like Horizon with a female protagonist, and people's love for Ellie in the Last of Us stories. And people are demonstrating that they do want to see more women, and I hope that will change the way that women are portrayed.
One thing that particularly grates on me is that there's the body type of women in everything is always the same now. It's always skinny and pretty. And even though you just go, she'd have some muscles if she's climbing up things and pulling. Bow and arrow, dynamically leaping up cliffs and no discernible muscle. And there's just no reason for it.
Springs, muscles or springs.
Springs.
I think that about brings us to the end of the show. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And we've really enjoyed our live show here today. So that's about it, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you.